everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of the Geeking Out podcast. I am the Athletic Geek, and I am joined this week. This is going to be a real fun one by Caleb Carter of the Four Sides podcast, another great podcaster here in this area, doing some great work interviewing other local wrestlers. And ended up meeting this individual through the High Spots virtual gimmick table, and then subsequently hanging out a little bit at Cape Comic Con in 2020. So, first of all, Caleb, thanks for doing this, man.
Hey, thanks for having me, dude. Appreciate it.
So my first question, because like we've on Facebook and at the Anified Underground and Cape Con and everything, we've shot the shit a little bit, but we never really other than just like a few random topics that came up in conversation, we never really had a full on deep conversation about professional wrestling. So my first question is the question that I have to all the wrestlers. It's, what got you interested in pro wrestling? What made you a fan?
Well, basically, what made me a fan was I just kind of started watching with my dad. Before that, I was kind of playing some of the Nintendo 64 games just because that's kind of the console I grew up playing. I would play WCW, NWO Revenge. I would play No Mercy, of course.
Yes.
And then I think whenever we were redoing the house, I think I was in 6th grade. And so since we were redoing the upstairs and everything, my bed was in the kitchen. And I was listening to what my dad was watching because, I had to go to bed early because I was still a kid. And he was watching wrestling, and I heard Jim Ross and I think Jerry the King Lawler commentating, and I'm like, this sounds awesome. I need to try to watch it sometime. And one day I just shot the question. I'm like, hey, Dad, can I stay up a little later and watch this with you? And this was when Raw was still 2 hours. It wasn't 3 hours. So
the good old days. The good old days.
The old days when it was good. So he was like, so you can stay up and watch the first hour, but you have to go to bed at 9 or whatever because, like I said, I was still a kid. And eventually it just became a thing for my dad and I to do on Monday nights. Eventually he let me stay up to watch the whole
So what was some of the stuff that really caught your eye whenever you were watching wrestling with your dad? Oh. Are you still there? You still
Yeah.
there? Okay.
Yeah. I cut out for a second, didn't I?
Yeah, you did. I was like, uh-oh, we might have to reshoot this whole thing, but I think we're good.
You might have to do some editing.
No, this is live to tape. We keep everything in there.
Oh, do ya? Hey, we're live, pal.
We're live, pal. That's how I start every. That's how I start every weekly live stream. I go, "We're live, pal." The people that know
we're
know.
live. Let's do it again. No, we're live, pal. Where was I?
Oh, well, you're talking about how eventually you got to stay up late and watch the whole thing with your dad instead of just the first hour. What were some of the storylines or wrestlers that really stuck out with you when you were first beginning to watch wrestling with your dad?
So, of course, like any kid growing up, I was a big fan of John Cena because, John Cena was the big superhero back in the day. A couple years later, as I kind of learned more about the product, I began to like guys like Batista, Randy Orton, Edge, and Rey Mysterio, Chris Jericho when he came back. I would even go as far to say probably Jericho's probably still one of my all-time favorites.
Okay. So I know in my fandom there was kind of the whole, there's the different levels, like where you think it's real, you know it's not real, but then you don't care, and then there always comes that period of time where you kind of discover the internet wrestling community, and then the whole, basically everything like what we do on our respective YouTube channels and podcasts. What age were you where you kind of became I don't want to use the term smart mark, but like became the internet wrestling fan, if you will?
So I think the internet wrestling fan thing began for me around probably 2010, kind of when the kind of when the whole anti-Cena thing was at its highest, I would say. And like I was a big fan of the Nexus and just Daniel Bryan, Wade Barrett, Justin Gabriel, those guys, and just I don't know, just to see them buried by John. Well, I hate using the term buried, but
Right.
to see how that whole story, just see how the whole storyline ended with them, it was just I was frustrated at it, and like as you get older, you gain access to the internet, and I think where it really, really took off for me was when CM Punk did the pipe bomb.
Gotcha. Okay.
That's kind of whenever I started to check out other things like Ring of Honor, New Japan, so and so,
Right.
because before then, like, the only shows I would watch were WWE shows and then occasionally TNA shows.
Gotcha. Okay.
So
You know,
I think that's kind of where I started to learn more about like there's more wrestling than just WWE or TNA. Like there's indie wrestlers and just it opened up a whole new world to me.
gotcha. Yeah, I do feel, there are a lot of people in this community that are kind of not the best examples of good wrestling fans out there, but there's also so many that, for all the grief that, some people say about, what the internet wrestling community does
Oh, it's
to
toxic.
wrestling, it can be very toxic. It can also be like, if it wasn't for the internet wrestling community, I wouldn't know what New Japan, like you said, New Japan Ring of Honor. I wouldn't have known who Bryan Danielson was before Daniel Bryan. I wouldn't have known about Johnny Gargano or, you know, Tyler Black, who later became Seth Rollins, Claudio Castagnoli, who later became Cesaro. I wouldn't have known about Kenny Omega just in general. So I feel like it can be very toxic, but it can also be like a very um, enlightening, might be too dramatic of a word, but it can really open your mind to so much. Um, you just gotta try not to become one of those toxic fans.
Right.
Um, no, you kind of mentioned John Cena a minute ago. Um, I had a I had another interview with another wrestling YouTuber here on the here in the community, Joseph Montecilio. Great guy. Gotta check out his videos, especially if you're interested in classic '90s All Japan Pro Wrestling or Daniel Bryan in general. But one of the points we kind of mentioned was, when you kind of first get into the internet wrestling community groove, it's kind of like you're one of the cool kids when you hate on John Cena.
Oh yeah.
But I,
Mm-hmm.
but I know, like, as I grew up, while you're never gonna see me, probably never gonna buy a John Cena WWE Elite figure, nor am I gonna ever buy a John Cena T-shirt, but I feel like I've kind of outgrown hating John Cena, even to the point now where like I can actually say that I enjoy John Cena. Has
Oh,
that
me
kind of
too. I mean,
okay? Because that happened to you, or are you kind of still in the? Because there's still people on
oh,
YouTube that
uh,
don't like John Cena. They respect him, but they don't care for his work at all. What say you?
I mean, I personally like John Cena. Like, I was kind of like you described, like hating John Cena because, it's the cool thing to do on the internet. But, like, as I've matured and looked back at Cena's work, it's like I would go as far to say that Cena's probably one of the greatest of all time.
I I mean, I stand by some of the reasons why I disliked him. Back in the earlier days. He shouldn't have beat the Nexus. He
Right.
probably should have lost the title a couple more times than he did. But on the flip side of things, it's kind of one of those. When I'd say Cena can't wrestle, well, it's you're kind of, I don't know. That's a little. Knowing what I know now about like just how good John Cena is, while he's not Dean Malenko
I'm,
or
anybody,
Kazuchika Okada, he can still go.
if anybody wants to say that John Cena can't wrestle, they need to go watch his 2015 work when he was doing the U.S. Open
Oh,
Challenge.
absolutely. I think that's why I finally came around, and I'm like, I can actually say I like John Cena right now. This is great.
Yeah.
um, okay, so you mentioned you discovered independent pro wrestling. What were some of the first bits of independent pro wrestling that really caught your attention?
Well, I mean, this is kind of a cliche answer, but Ring of Honor kind of back. I don't really consider Ring of Honor an indie anymore. I consider them more mainstream, but kind of back in the day I did. And then, of course, PWG. I always enjoyed their goofy angles that they did, while also providing some of the top professional wrestling in the country. But kind of as I kind of as I grew older, there was a promotion that actually started here where I grew up in Cape Girardeau called Cape Championship Wrestling, and that was actually the first indie that I actually attended. And I think since then I've become more for indie wrestling than mainstream wrestling, if that makes sense.
Right, right. Um, okay, so you mentioned Cape Championship Wrestling. What are some of the? And this just goes beyond Cape Championship Wrestling, and just who are some of the talent through all the indies that really just made you become more of that independent fan compared to the mainstream fan?
Well, I mean, even though I started watching them in TNA and WWE, I mean, guys like CM Punk and Samoa Joe. I saw a little bit of Daniel Bryan while he was Bryan Danielson in Ring of Honor, and then Kevin Steen as well before they went to the big Fed, so to say.
Right,
And then Tommaso Ciampa's
absolutely.
another one of my favorites. Roderick Strong, Adam Cole. There's just so many names that caught my eye, especially in Ring of Honor around like 2013 to 2015. I think that was my time where I was like a really big Ring of Honor fan.
Awesome. So you mentioned that the first indie you ever attended was Cape Championship Wrestling. Um, for those that don't live kind of in this area to know about CCW, as somebody who's very, very passionately involved in that, or I don't know if I'd say involved, but passionately follows that promotion, how would you describe CCW to someone from the East or West Coast that hasn't seen CCW before?
So, to be honest with you, CCW kind of started as like. Now, I describe Memphis wrestling as, very old school. It kind of started as that, and then the second show that they did, they brought in Ricochet, and I think ever since then they've focused on having a good mixture of the old school wrestling while bringing in the new school wrestling, and you see the storytelling while you also see like the fancy moves. So it's just overall CCW is it's a good mix of just about everything that everyone wants to see in a wrestling show.
If speaking to some of those fans that haven't seen CCW before from other parts of the country, who are some of the talented wrestlers in CCW that you would like to say, hey, check this person out, look him up on YouTube, or look her up on YouTube?
Well, it's actually interesting you say that because someone that signed with AEW right now, despite what you think of him, Marco Stunt actually kind of came up in CCW. So he was an indie guy there before he got signed and before he started to go big with Game Changer Wrestling and everything. There's another guy, Jackson Crowley. He's kind of from the Memphis area, but he's a really phenomenal dude. Reminds me a lot of Finn Balor, his move set and just kind of his gimmick. Blake Christian's been through CCW a few times. There's just so many great people that have come through CCW and have gone places. But some of the local guys, Brandon Barbwire, he's a local here. Check him out. Austin Lane, he's a guy down in Arkansas. He's come up to CCW quite a few times, has become pretty much a mainstay there. I think right now what CCW is doing is they're trying to focus on some of the newer guys, like there's this guy Walker Hayes, and then Aaron Roberts. Those are Tennessee guys, and then you got guys that went through the CCW training camp, like J.J. Walker and Trent Daniels. I mean, they're a tag team right now, pretty good. Uh, I don't know, man. There's just so many. I could talk about it all day. Like, there's just the talented people on the CCW roster.
Absolutely. Um, so you kind of mentioned all these independent guys, from 2013, 2015. You said, um, what are some of the promotions you like to follow right now other than CCW?
Well, of course, Anna Fight Underground over in Anna, Illinois. Their show is going to be February 25th. Make sure you get your tickets for that.
This episode should be dropping the day before that episode or before that show is. So yes, definitely get your tickets and go there if you listen to this and you're from the area. Or hey, if you got the money to fly, fly on down for it. Super Crazy's supposed to be there. It's gonna be great.
Yeah, it's crazy. Necro Butcher's going to be there. John Wayne Murdoch, of course. He's a IWTV Independent Wrestler of the Year. Another guy I like to follow these days. But anyway, some indie promotions I follow actively. Zero One USA up in Noble, Illinois. They've been putting on some great shows. St. Louis Anarchy. They're not really running a lot right now because of COVID, but I've always loved St. Louis Anarchy.
Oh yeah, it was. I was following them when they were still the LWA. They're
Uh-huh.
great stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Glory Pro Wrestling, of course. There's a new promotion starting in St. Louis that I'm going to be following. WrestleMax St. Louis.
Oh yeah, I'm very excited about that. I've had KLD on the show, and I wish him the best with that with this promotion.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Sometimes I like to check out. Now, there's not many places down in West Tennessee that I like, but there's a place called TIWF. They're okay. I go down there sometimes. They always treat me well when I'm down there, so that's another good place.
well, okay, it's funny you put it that way because that kind of leads into my next question. Of all the independents you go to, which one do you really feel is the most? I want like not you're not putting any promotion down, but like which one do you really feel is the most for the fans, from your perspective?
Say that again.
Like if you go to the show, like which one like really is for the fans? Which one makes you feel like you're more part of the show compared to others? Like what of those promotions you talked about?
I mean, that's hard to say, honestly, because like honestly, all the shows make the fans feel like they're a part. I can't really speak for WrestleMax St. Louis right now
Right.
because they haven't started. CCW and CCW's always been really good about fan involvement and the wrestlers interacting with the fans, and like
Right.
I've even had, like, whenever I was still a fan before I kind of started getting more involved with them, like it felt like a lot of the wrestlers there were family to me, sort of. I
Right.
know that it's thrown around a lot, but I mean it really felt like that.
Absolutely. Um. So the first time you and I talked was at uh, mentioned earlier Cape Comic Con. Uh, we were waiting for a Camille Brickhouse to make it to her table to to cash in our last prepaid meet and greet that we had paid for. And I know privately you and I have had several conversations about going to be it independent wrestling shows, conventions, and what have you, and meeting the wrestlers that we that we enjoy. Just want to talk about some of the fun experiences that you've had meeting some of these wrestlers, be it somebody who's a Hall of Famer, a WWE superstar, or just somebody who's up and coming. What are some of your fun memories of meeting wrestlers at these events?
Well, I'll list one from Cape Comic Con. Sammy Guevara was pretty cool. We literally talked to him for like an hour. He was just like fans were just coming around his table, even the fans that had already paid for meet and greets with him, and he was just talking to everybody. And
Right.
Sammy's just a really chill dude overall. Glacier, I met him at CCW. He was a really down to earth guy. I actually designed a picture for him to get signed because I think it was a bring your own event signing, and
Gotcha.
I didn't have anything for him to sign. So being that I like doing some graphic design, I decided to make up a picture, like a custom 8x10, and
Nice.
He signs it, and he's like, "That's really cool, man. You should add me on Facebook and tag me in that, and I'll share it." So me and Glacier are Facebook friends, so that's pretty
Nice.
cool.
Um, so, just because I don't know when I'm going to be able to share this story any other time, were you aware of the fight that happened at Cape Con in 2020?
Uh, I wasn't there. I've heard different things from different people. So, did you witness the fight?
I witnessed it. This is just okay. So just because I gotta tell, I don't know when I'm ever gonna get the chance to tell this story, and it's kind of like it's a surreal story. But there's just I'm in line to meet Darby Allen. I get there early enough because like I've never. This is my first time ever going to Cape Con, and I'm like, okay, this is kind of the first convention in the area. Since the pandemic, is it gonna be packed? Is it gonna not be packed? Is it gonna be two? They're gonna be phasing people in and out. This, that, and the other. So I'm like, okay, get there early. So I'm kind of waiting for I'm not the first in line, but I'm Darby Allen's there, Sammy Guevara's there. Then all of a sudden I see like two guys like kind of causing a commotion. I'm thinking like, oh, they're messing around. Then I just see these two individuals, and they're like they're swinging each other, and then one guy like takes him to the ground. He starts peppering him, and then I see like Gambits and Wolverine and like Black Panther run in and chase the guy away. I'm not done. I'm not done. So
I just love how you said that.
Yeah. So Gambit
Like Wolverine just kind of ran in and did his thing, whatever.
well, the Wolverine runs in, and from like first of all, like Darby's pulling the guy off of him, you know, and I see like essentially two X-Men and the Avengers running in, and I see the guy run out, and then I think it's like Black Panther takes off after him, and I hear Black Panther say, "Someone stop him! I'm an off-duty cop." It turns out that Gambit, Wolverine, and Black Panther, and all these guys, they were like off-duty cops. So it's very surreal. Just straight up see after this, like you're seeing the guy who's like a vendor he's giving his police statement for after being assaulted, and you see a uniformed cop, Wolverine, Gambit, and Black Panther, like, yes sir, yes sir. So what happened then, sir? Yes sir. It's like straight up the Avengers and the X-Men are here at Cape Con fighting crime. But kind of to tie this back into the wrestling is, first of all, Darby's like pulling the guy off of him, and I'm like, oh shit. And then like uh, Ken, the guy that runs the convention, he's kind of coming in going like, does anybody have video? And then like you have Sammy Guevara, which cool dude. We've already established just how cool he is, but he's got this like he's always got like the douchebag face. I hate to say about him, but like he always looks like he's in like even when he's being nice, like he's got a face like he's being a douche. So he's like with his douchey face being really really like telling like one of the superhero cosplayer police officers there. Oh, I got the fight recorded on my phone. They're like, do you need my phone? Yeah, man, that's fine. I'll do whatever you need. And I'm like, um, okay. Like, I can tell he's being cooperative, but he still looks like he's getting ready to like be the douchebag he was on Being the Elite. You know what I mean? Like threw like Brandon Cutler's passport away and shit like that. So yeah, that was my recollection, and I just had to tell. I hate to hijack your time, but I don't know when I'm gonna tell the story of Cape Comic Con and straight up the Avengers X-Men cops stopping crime or stopping an assault or something.
Hey, only in Cape Girardeau would something like that happen.
Only in Cape Girardeau. So kind of
How
getting
is
to
it?
focus back on task here. You've been to a lot. We text quite a bit. You travel quite a bit for some shows. What are some of the biggest and most memorable shows you've traveled for? Be it something that may have happened in our backyard, like Cape, St. Louis, things of that nature. Or was there one where you've decided to fly or take a long road trip to follow? Anything like that that stands out to you?
We could talk about anything from the show I went to down south. I won't say the promotion so I don't get heat for it, but they had like a birthday celebration at the beginning, and it ended up with I guess the big heel of the promotion getting cake to the face, and I swear, like after that, they just kind of took some towels and just kind of rubbed the remains of the chocolate cake off, and they wrestled with cake on the canvas the entire night, basically. So that was an interesting show, but one that really, really sticks out to me, and I think this is probably still to this day my favorite indie wrestling show, and that's the Game Changer Wrestling when they did the show with Black Label Pro, Two Cup stuff
Okay.
up in Chicago. Main event of that show was Nick Gage versus Effie, and it was a bloodbath. They tore it down. That was the. I hate saying that because now I remember that's the show where G Raver had the bad accident with his arm and everything.
I'm not familiar with this.
Okay, so what happened was they were having like well, it was a TLC match, but they were using doors, so it was a DLC match, and basically the winner of the match got their match of choice at Spring Break. So G Raver and Jimmy Lloyd are setting up a spot on top of a ladder with light tubes kind of attached to the ladder. Which now that I look back at it, I'm like I kind of think who thought that was a good idea, but I mean it doesn't take away from how bad the accident was. I think they something happened and they fell, and G Raver cut an artery in his arm or something.
Oh
And
dang.
yeah, thankfully it wasn't deep enough for him to bleed out. But I mean, thankfully they were able to get him to the hospital in time. I was actually in the by the entrance when Jimmy Lloyd was rushing G Raver to the back. It was probably to this date one of the most horrifying things I've seen at a wrestling event. So I'm glad G Raver's doing okay now. He's back in the ring doing his stuff. So
Yeah.
yeah, just thank goodness that didn't. Thank goodness that wasn't worse because it could have been a hell of a lot worse.
Absolutely. Yeah, I wasn't familiar with this, but dang, that sucks. But it's kind of an interesting segue because I know, again, from our conversations, there's one thing that you and I agree to disagree on, and that is Nick Gage. And a lot of people have a lot of opinions on Nick Gage and his the style of wrestling that he is most synonymous with. And um, back this past summer, I had another podcaster named Bahu FMW, who's pretty well a historian on FMW and can tell like basically he is the authority on FMW wrestling in the United States. And I kind of asked him what connected him with the deathmatch wrestling of Onita, Hayabusa, etc. from back then, and it helped me gain a new perspective. Not that I disliked Hayabusa, but just helped me like kind of see things a little differently when it came to FMW. Not gonna say it's my favorite wrestling in the world, but it helped me see things a little differently. I'm asking you, help me see things a little differently when it comes to Nick Gage and deathmatch wrestling.
I mean, I understand that deathmatch wrestling isn't for everybody, and but And I didn't really care for it at first myself, but kind of the more I watched it and kind of, and I'll be honest, Nick Gage was a big part of me kind of watching it because I saw Nick Gage in person, and I think it's just for me, it was just one of those things I had to see in person to understand it. And like I said, if it's not your thing, it's not your thing. I get it, but when Nick Gage makes his entrance, and I've described this several times on my podcast, Four Sides, the atmosphere of the crowd and the entire building just instantly changes. It's like everyone's chanting Nick effing Gage. I'm not sure if we're allowed to curse on
You
the
can
show or
say
not.
whatever you want. Just yeah, just
Yeah,
say
but
whatever you want. Just don't be a bigot. That's my that's my only rule, and I don't think we got to worry about that.
just don't be obscure, Caleb. All right, but I think Nick Gage and just the energy of now. I will admit Nick Gage does have a lot of stupid fans, but just going to the Game Changer shows and seeing seeing it in person, realizing the art behind it. I'm not saying like I think Joey Janela getting thrown off of a 30 foot, 40 foot, wherever that spot was. I think stuff like that's ridiculous, but I mean hitting a dude in the back with a light tube. I mean it's just another style of hardcore wrestling. It's not for everybody, but
Right. It's funny you mention Nick Gage, and I told this story to KLD when he was on the show. But uh, before COVID ruined the world, there was a match in Glory Pro Wrestling
hmm
pitting Nick Gage. I believe you were at this show as well. Nick Gage versus KLD in a essentially a death match.
that's
Um,
pretty much what it was.
and this was gonna I was taking the whole day to kind of enjoy the area of St. Louis before the show. There's a great heavy metal bar that has on the weekends has what's called the metal brunch. So I was had the Crow's Nest chicken and waffle metal brunch along with a couple screwdrivers to start my day, and
hmm
had several beverages at the Collinsville KC Hall throughout the course of that day. And when Nick Gage, who's wrestling my guy, my hometown guy, KLD, come out, I kind of lost the ability to know when to not say and not do and not create things that may lead to yourself getting hurt or becoming collateral damage. So there might be a few times if you go back and watch that on independentwrestling.tv where you see a very intoxicated athletic geek giving putting his middle finger right in Nick Gage's face, yelling, "Fuck you, Gage, you're trash! Fuck you, Gage, it's KLD's house, you bitch!" And when he gets knocked on the ground, putting both my middle fingers in Nick Gage's face, and amazingly, I'm not dead. Amazingly, I'm still here to tell this tale. But I can't say I'm a Nick Gage fan, but I can say at least on that occasion, I appreciated, kind of the passion of his fan base going up against the passion of KLD's fan base. It was like, it was really like a college football game, where you know you have both the passionate fan bases, facing off in the Rose Bowl or the national championship game, and it's like, holy shit, this is big. So while no offense to any of the MDK gang out there, he's still not one of my favorite guys. I can at least on that occasion say I appreciate Nick Gage.
Yeah, and that's pretty much a Nick Gage match. I mean, with the exception of one time, it was against Jeremy Wyatt at Anarchy, who's probably the biggest heel there. Everybody was on Nick Gage's side that night.
Right.
But I'm not saying that Nick Gage is
My
like,
favorite thing to do with Jeremy Wyatt, I've been heckling Jeremy Wyatt at shows for 12 years at this point. My favorite thing to do with Jeremy Wyatt is I try to get him to heckle me, but I try to get him to laugh first.
yeah,
That's always my goal. I remember getting like there's a picture from All American Pro Wrestling of all things with Jeremy Wyatt of me going to like acting like I want a high five from Jeremy Wyatt, and my buddy got like a picture of him like just looking at me in absolute disgust as I'm like here with my hand out and like a cheesy smile on my face like high five, buddy.
yeah.
Um,
But anyways, I'm not saying that like Nick Gage is the hottest shit out there, like a lot of people say. But I mean, he's a good flavor of, I guess, modern day deathmatch wrestling. Like I said, not everybody's thing. I respect that, but I'll leave it at that.
um, so kind of on the same level as deathmatch wrestling. Nick Gage is kind of like you said, he is the modern day deathmatch king. Um, are there any other of the deathmatch wrestlers that have kind of been out there that have really captured your attention? Um, I've through Bahu's podcast, I was found out about Matt Tremont, and his program with Onita. Found out about all these different guys, the Freedoms promotion in Japan. Other than Gage, what are some other deathmatch sort of things that have your attention?
Well, I think the big guy that's got my attention right now is John Wayne Murdoch, like I said earlier.
Another great
Um,
guy. Saw met him at Anified Underground. Great dude.
yeah, and the Fight Underground is like my main focus, I guess, when it comes to quote unquote deathmatch wrestling. Like, I think that's another promotion that has an absolutely stacked roster. Like, you've got some of the big names like John Wayne Murdoch, Reed Bentley, Gary J. Well, I mean, still kind of a local guy, but I kind of consider him a big name too. And then
Right.
you got some of the guys that are going to be stars, like you got Satu Jin. I like to call him the big Majin Buu boy.
Oh yeah.
You
I
got
really want to get him on the show because I
yeah,
really got to talk about Majin Buu with him, and just
that
get I cover both. I cover two tops. Cover wrestling and anime in one podcast. It'd be great.
go. But yeah, Anakin Murphy, that kid's gonna be
Oh
that kid's
yeah.
big. Then you got the local guys who have been around there forever. Like you got Cash Borden, you got Dalton Diamond, Bull Bronson, Madman Pondo.
Right.
Even though Pondo's a legend, but it's just like that's probably my main focus. Again, quote unquote deathmatch wrestling. I like to also catch the ICW shows on IWTV, especially the pit fight shows. Those are really good ones.
It's funny though. And I'm not taking anything away from that night at Anified Underground. It was a great night. Uh, But my favorite match was actually the opening contest with B-Rad and Savion Ayers. That was my favorite match of the night. In my opinion, they stole the show.
Yeah, they did put on a pretty good match. I mean, it's a shame that like I get their two newer guys, but I really would have loved to see that match on the main card.
Right, but it was still a damn fine match, and ended up B-Rad coming on the show. So it made a new connection there. Yeah, it was really. Um, there's so many more things I want to ask you, but I guess since we're kind of on the subject, you mentioned Anified Underground and that kind of being your promotion. Um, what was your opinion overall of that show on the first night? Because I know some people thought it was one of the best in the area in quite some time. Some people had some harsh criticisms about the show. Uh, what did you think?
I think with any time you do a first show, there's going to be things you can do better. Like, like, I've seen people on Twitter saying things like the with the whole mask thing, and it's hard to argue with that. I think there should have been a mask mandate for the event. I think one of the things locally though is I think some people got the impression that it was going to be like completely a deathmatch show, but it was. And I'm guilty. I'm a little guilty of this myself. But I kind of looked back on it, and I really appreciated, like, again, Game Changer Wrestling has a. It's not just deathmatch wrestling. It has a good mix of everything, and I think that's what NFI Underground is here to do. Be kind of a local Game Changer Wrestling for us.
Right. I kind of see that. I made a comparison to to someone, back in the mid 2000s, Chikara and CZW had like a working relationship. And that's kind of me being in the Southern Illinois area. It's like I see Anafied Underground CZW and then like, the hardcore death matches, but with still the technical wrestling. But then like you also have Stride, which is more the Chikara, the family friendly, but you can still integrate some, like how Chikara integrated Eddie Kingston, Stride integrates Cash Borden. So that's
Hmm.
kind of that's the dynamic that I see. Um, and I want Anified Underground to do really well because it's local and I know the people who run it. I know they love wrestling. I know they want to make something like this succeed. Um, the only thing I just hope for is that with Anified Underground, I say this with all respect and love for them. I hope they know some. I hope they know sometimes they're gonna have to be a boss, and they're gonna have to, from what I've heard from other people talk, they might have to put their foot down, no matter how legendary some people might be in the locker room.
I mean, I think that's with just about any promotion. I mean, we had the big speaking out movement this past June,
Right.
and guys like Joey Ryan and David Starr were exposed because, I mean, it's a good thing they were too because I mean, we didn't know that they were pieces. I mean, I knew David Starr was a piece of shit already, but like,
Now, see, that was the one that with this whole movement surprised me because he was such an advocate against. You know what I mean? Like he was an advocate for all these things that you wouldn't. He was basically exposed as a hypocrite, and not a lot of things offend me in the world, but hypocrisy does, and that was big for me.
yeah, I
Um,
mean, that's just one of the sad things about the wrestling business, man. Is there's always going to be those bad people, and
right,
I mean, sometimes, I mean, it's like you said, sometimes people are going to have to put their foot down, and
right,
it's like wrestling's fun, but it's also a business.
exactly. And I think they're off to a good start.
Oh, absolutely.
And I wasn't there, but just kind of with after having Bull on the show, having Cash on the show, and kind of hearing a few things they mentioned, it kind of, and I think we talked about this a little bit, just in our normal text messaging. It's kind of became a little disappointed to learn a few things about somebody that I once kind of really held in high regard, but it is
Yeah.
what it is, and you know, I hope that that's kind of like I hope they learn that they can't really tolerate things like that because that might upset their fan base. But on the flip side of things, it's easy for you or I to sit here and be Monday morning quarterback and say, well, they should do this, they should do that. Where we're not in their shoes, we're not the one having in that locker room having to be that person. Maybe easier said than done.
Right. And I mean, I'm not justifying things that people do, but like wrestlers, I feel like sometimes people treat wrestlers like they're supposed to be perfect people, and they make mistakes sometimes, and just like any other person, I think it's about learning from your mistake and moving on, being a better person, and if you're not, then maybe it's just time somebody gives you the boot, and that's just how it is. That's just how I see it, anyways.
Right.
Like I'm not gonna lie, I was livid, even though it happened. Even though it happened like a few years back, I was really livid whenever I heard about the comments that Sammy Guevara made about Sasha.
Right.
But then I kind of sat and thought about it, and I watched Sammy's apology video, and it seemed like he was being serious, and just how cool he was at Comic Con and everything. Um,
Right.
I think that's kind of the point where I was like, hey, wrestlers are human beings. They make mistakes sometimes, and they're capable of learning from their mistakes and being better people.
Right. Um.
And then you got somebody like Joey Ryan that makes like an hour long video pretty much saying that all his accusers are liars, which those people have no place in the business.
And, I mean, I'm not just finding anything. I'm just saying, like, yeah, it's kind of. I don't like talking about this on the channel. Unfortunately, it's just something that, like, it's a necessary evil, but just kind of like, it's.
It's a controversial subject. I
Well,
get it.
it's it's something that needs to be done, and this is a movement that needed to happen. The wrestling business will be better because this happened, but it's one of those. It's like I started this channel to have fun. It's like this is like the least fun you can have talking about wrestling. It's the people that you once looked up to. Turns out they're douchebags and they're predators. And it's like
I
motherfuck.
was,
I bought his
I was,
T-shirt. I bought their T-shirt. I bought an autograph from them. I bought a photo op from them. And now like turns out they were actually not that good of a person.
I mean, I'm not gonna lie, dude. I was actually depressed for like a day or two when I found out about Joey Ryan. But
Right.
it is that's just how it is. Like
Right.
not everybody can be an angel, unfortunately.
Unfortunately, but you know, I just mentioned, like the main reason I started this was to have fun and to have something positive to look forward to with my YouTube channel talking about things I love, wrestling, comics. You have your own podcast, so it's taken us 45 minutes, but we're finally going to talk about your podcast. What when did your podcast start? What was your inspiration? What have been some stories with you doing you know your projects in this realm? Tell us about Four Sides.
So it's funny because Four Sides actually started as a blog in I think 2018 to do a ranking system for Cape Championship Wrestling. And then I kind of let it go, and for just forever I've been wanting to do a podcast. So one day I was like, I don't know what to call it, and I look back on my blog and I'm like, hey, why don't I call it Four Sides Podcast? Because Four Sides kind of had a ring to it, and I just rolled with it, and it worked. As far as why I started the podcast, just like you, to have something to look forward to get to share my thoughts and opinions on wrestling, to kind of help the excuse me, I can't talk this evening.
We've all been there before. It happens.
Long day, brother. But yeah, just to help the local shows get noticed, and to hear stories from other wrestlers, get to share my own stories. It's just I've been doing it for a little over a year now, so I think it's been great. We've had quite a few guests on. We've had Big Lee from the Big Lee's World. Shout out to Big Lee. We've had Savannah Stone. She was on. James Brady was on. Uh, Jackson Crowley. He was on one. Just had Rain Victoria on an episode. She's a big deal up at Zero One USA. Just had Gary J on this
He's
past week
he's
for an
great,
episode.
isn't he?
I love Gary. Gary is like, I was telling Gary the other day, like, I've known him for like a few years now, and it's interesting. Kind of like, I mean, I know we haven't known each other as long, but it's like, it took me that long to just kind of sit down and have a conversation with Gary, and it's just mind blowing. But yeah, Gary's a really fun guy to talk to.
Oh
It
yeah,
was,
and he's like I always not gonna lie, like there's sometimes I'm getting ready to interview like some people, like I have the butterflies, like oh please don't be mushmouth, please don't have any technological glitches, please, as bush league is my setup is, at least fake it to being professional, and like I'm interviewing these people, like Gary, who's kind of been around the world as far as
Mhm.
wrestling, and I'm like, oh god, I hope this doesn't mess up. I hope this doesn't mess up. Please go smooth. And like 1 minute into that conversation, it's like there's no butterflies. Gary makes you feel so at ease.
Yeah,
You know,
Gary's such an easy dude to talk to, and it's like whenever he wanted to come on four sides, it was a big deal to me. But just like you said, 9 minutes into the conversation, it's like, oh, I'm talking to Gary J like a normal person, and
right? Um,
it's not it's not really as much of a challenge as I thought it'd be. Like I'm keeping my composure, and it's going well.
and yeah, there are just so many things like, he was so willing to talk about his start. He's willing to talk about all the different people he wrestled from El Generico to a pre-evil evil. Um,
Evil, evil. Say that
pre
3 times.
say it, tweet me saying that 3 times fast, and I will send you a comic book. That's not a
There,
rip. That is not
it's
a
a good.
rip. Um, but you mentioned all those people that you had on your podcast. Like, what you ever had any of those butterfly feelings, like trying to reach out to someone, uh, like I have, or has it always just been pretty natural for you to have these conversations with wrestlers?
I mean, kind of whenever I started, I was nervous reaching out to people. Like, I don't know what it was, man. It's just, I think it's just the common fear of somebody saying no. Which I mean, I've gotten a few people that haven't responded back to me, but
Right.
I don't know. It's just hard to hear the word no, especially whenever you're so determined to put out a great product for people. And
Exactly.
I'm not saying my product's not great, but I want it to be the best I can, and I'm my own harshest critic, and I'm sure you can relate to that.
Absolutely. Um, yeah, it's just like I kind of like. I guess my biggest fear is kind of like whenever I'm like typing out the message and I'm like I'm trying to be real professional and put headings, and then like I know it's like where autocorrect messed with my I send it and then autocorrect messed up a word, or I repeat myself and I'm like, God damn it, no, 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 they're not gonna want to be on the shit, and I'm like all frustrated. Then they like come back like, oh yeah, man, that sounds great, just let me know what time you want to do it. And then I'm like, oh, thank God, he didn't think I was an idiot,
I think the big one I think the one I was most nervous to ask about, but they ended up saying yes was Reign Victoria because whenever I started Four Sides, she was on my list of people I wanted to bring in just because, she's somebody I kind of watched since close to the beginning of her wrestling career, but she had just gotten off of that appearance on AEW Dark.
Right.
So, I mean, and I wanted to bring her on before the whole COVID pandemic thing started.
And
So
just let the people know, like you do your interviews in person. Like right now, we're doing it through social media. That's how I do my interviews. But you do yours in house, correct, or in at the show?
um I do most of mine in house. I've been giving people the option to do Skype or whatever, just because the pandemic's still going on and
Right.
whatever. But anyways, back to Rain. The reason I thought she would say no at first was because I just thought she would have this thought in her head like, oh, he just wants to bring me on his podcast because I was on AEW Dark. He just wants to blah blah blah. He didn't want me before, and it's like, and then she was like, sure, that sounds great. And I'm like, awesome. But yeah, I understand getting those butterflies, getting that anxiety whenever asking people to come on. But I mean, it gets easier the more you do it, man.
Right. And then it's kind of one of those, like, I started this whole thing started. I was asking friends and friends that were wrestlers, and they're kind of giving me the hookup, and friends that were artists, and then eventually, like, you know the first person I really reached out to that was big was Eric Hodson. Which I've met him at conventions. He's a great guy. He's been on the show 3 times. Um, and the room I'm sitting in right now is like covered in all of his art pieces that have been autographed by the wrestlers themselves. But I remember just like that was like the first one, like, hey, let me ask someone who actually has somewhat of a following. And then it was him that actually kind of told me, like, hey, don't be afraid to ask someone. The worst they can just say is no, and you're going to hear no. So don't let that bother you. And I think that was like, well, there's still that anxiety, like you said. There's still kind of well, hey, why not ask whoever? Hey, ask Gary J. What's worse he can say? No. Okay.
Right.
Well, Gary's not on there. Oh, he said yes, and he's cool as hell. Ask KLD. Oh, he said yes, he's cool as hell. You know what I mean? And uh, it just kind of snowballed from there. And yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's just the fear to overcome. Just like you said, the worst they could say is no, and just realizing that just makes it a lot easier to ask people. There was actually somebody else I asked the other day that I was kind of getting nervous. I was kind of getting nervous about when typing the message, kind of for the same reason for getting nervous about asking Rain Victoria. But this was Cassandra Godin I was asking, and she basically said the same thing. Sure, I'd be down to come on four sides. So,
uh, what are your goals for your podcast in the future?
well, my goals for the future, I definitely would like to have a setup at conventions to kind of spread my word, which I think right now is what I'm really working on right now. It's just kind of getting my name out there, interviewing guests from other promotions like Zero One USA or some Tennessee guys or some guys up in St. Louis, just to kind of, because their fans will look at that and say, hey, maybe I should listen to this, or hey, maybe I should go and listen to Caleb's other episodes. And I think that's just my big goal right now, is to build my fan base, because honestly, I took a little bit of a break from the podcast during COVID, and I think that really kind of crushed some of the momentum I had going. Kind of getting that back now, but my main goal right now is to build my fan base. Like I said, long-term goals, I'd like to be up there with the big podcasts, like, of course, Talk is Jericho and Something to Wrestle with Bruce Pritchard and all of those podcasts. I want to be up there with them one of these days. That's a long-term goal.
You could have one dream guest. Who would it be?
One dream guest.
Anybody. Like if you get one guaranteed person that will say yes, I will be on there. It can be anybody from wrestling or otherwise. I know you're strictly wrestling podcast, but anybody. Who would you want?
Oh man, now I know how it feels when I ask wrestlers if they could face anybody. Who would they face? Because I just got so many
How the tables
names.
have turned.
But nah, really, I think the one person I would want on my podcast, if they could guaranteed say yes, I think it'd be Marco Stunt, honestly. Which,
Okay.
honestly, which I mean, we couldn't do that right now because, of course, he's with AEW, and they have the whole contract thing, blah blah blah. But just since I kind of see Marco come up and stuff like that, I think him and I would have some really good conversation. Like, I think that could even be like a 3 hour long podcast. I know that may not be the answer you were looking for,
No, no, it's
but I
great. Like, as I want to hear, because everybody can go like, well, I want Vince McMahon because it's Vince McMahon, or I want John Cena because he's John Cena, or I want Cody or Kenny or the Bucks or Hulk Hogan or Stone Cold Steve Austin, you know, and I mean, those aren't wrong. Those aren't bad ideas. I mean, if I could, I'd take all of
right,
them if they'd say yes. But like, no, I like that answer because it's a different perspective. It isn't just shooting for the stars for the sake of it's the stars. It's like you have a good reason for wanting Marco Stunt on your show.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to have all those other names on my show, but like right now, and I always talk to people about this, but I'm mostly an indie guy right now. I hardly watch wrestling on TV anymore. Like I watched the Royal Rumble the other day just because, I always watch the Royal Rumble because it's my favorite match probably. But I think the last time before that I actually watched something that was mainstream wrestling was AEW's All Out.
Okay, so you're not even an AEW fan, or just not don't really keep up with it, or
Uh, it's not that I'm not a fan, it's just I don't really keep up with it a whole lot. I watch the highlights occasionally, but it's like I was telling Gary this the other day when we did our podcast. Being there in person for a wrestling show versus watching it on TV, it's just sitting at home and watching it on TV. While it's good sometimes, it's just I don't get the satisfaction I'm always looking for watching it from home. I'd rather be there in person.
yeah, I gotcha. I mean, it's
And
there's
that's
nothing wrong
nothing.
with that perspective. I certainly respect it.
Yeah, and that's nothing. That's nothing against the guys on the rosters or anything. It's nothing against their products or nothing. It's just I'm more of a. I've become more of an outgoing person as my not just my wrestling journey, but my journey in life in general has progressed.
So you've mentioned that you've kind of become associated with CCW and you've worked with some wrestling promotions. So other than just your podcast, what are some stories that you've had from just working directly with the local wrestling promotions and the connections you've made? Just tell us a few quick stories about that.
Well, I right now my roles are I do graphic designing for Cape Championship Wrestling and NFI Underground. I did some commentary for CCW back in September when they did their last show of the year. I'm assuming I'm going to be doing commentary when they come back in March.
And I've done commentary before for MMWA at South Broadway, and it is harder than it looks. What do you
It's
think is
not
the biggest
like
misconception people might have about that you think people might have about doing wrestling commentary?
I mean, and I thought this myself. Like commentary isn't just sitting there and talking while you're watching a match. Like you have to observe certain elements of the match. You have to say certain things to like you're practically for the people who are watching at home or if you're I know certain places do commentary over the live microphone, which I don't like that. I think it takes away from the wrestling in the ring at the live event, but like when you're sitting at home watching a wrestling match and you hear the commentators, those are the guys that are contribute that they're not telling the entire story, but they're contributing to telling the story of that match. And I think people get this misconception that commentary is just watching the match and talking about it
Right.
when there's so much more that goes into it.
Absolutely. And yeah, and it's very hard. Like I did it like two or three times, and eventually I'm just like, I mean, if you want to have me back, that's fine. And then, but if not, like, because I don't think I'm that good. So, um, there are people who are better. Uh,
That's kind of how I was with ring announcing. Like I enjoyed doing it the first time, but I mean, there's just I don't know. It just ring announcing just wasn't my thing, man. It just wasn't. I'm
uh,
more of I'm more of the commentary guy, I think.
right. Were you the good guy commentator or the bad guy commentator?
Well, it just depends on what they need, really. I mean, I've kind of gone. I've done mostly babyface, I think, but I would like to get in some heel commentary. I think I
Right.
would. I think I'd be good at that. Like, Like sometimes I just sit and think about certain match scenarios and things that I could say that could get a pop.
Right. Um, it's funny you mentioned that because like I was starting doing did a couple commentaries for MMWA, and I remember texting one of my co-hosts on the live stream, and he's like, "Oh, are you the heel or the face?" I'm like, "I'm the face." He's like, "Oh, I would have asked to be the heel," and I'm like, "I'm doing what the promoter has told me to do, and
Right.
I'm not really gonna ask to change anything. I'm really good." Like that was kind of like my first like. I'll never be a pro wrestler, but like that was kind of my first like experience of hey, shut up, stay in your lane, do what they tell you to do, go shake the wrestlers' hands, go ask questions of the wrestlers of what they want to do because you're making them look better. Like that was my whole everything. And I just remember it's kind of like this is my first like, okay, I am nothing. Shut up, just shut up and do what they tell you to, and maybe they'll ask me back. And that was just kind of my whole mindset that first time going through that like as soon as the show was over like I think I just like shotgun like 3 beers because I was so nervous that night.
Right.
um but yeah it's definitely very difficult, and I'm really anybody that can continually do it like you are, you definitely have my respect, sir.
Oh well, thanks. I mean, I haven't done it that much yet. Like I said, CCW's been on a little bit of a break because of COVID, but they'll be coming back in March in Charleston, Missouri for CCW Chaos in Charleston 3. I don't know why we've been around for like 5 years. I don't know why we're still putting numbers behind our events, but I mean, it's wherever they want, I guess.
um we we've covered a lot of ground. I definitely want to have you back on for some future projects. I know we've been discussing some.
Hmm.
Um, but is there anything that you would just like to mention about your podcast now? Again, maybe reach another audience or just anything you'd like to say before
I
we put a
mean,
bow on this one?
like I said, we're going to be having an upcoming episode with Cassandra Golden. She was on AEW Dark a couple times. I think she was actually on an episode of Dynamite actually whenever the pandemic first started. Super cool person. I'd recommend checking that out. You can find us on social media. Facebook. The Facebook page is just called Four Sides. On Twitter and Instagram, we are at Four Sides IV. We are on Anchor, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. We're on a bunch of platforms that nobody listens to. uh, so if you want to find that, Twitter our Twitter bio has a link tree in it. So just click on that and you'll see all the platforms we're on,
Right
basically.
on. All
But
right.
other than that, man, I mean, I'm just like I said, I'm just looking to build up my fan base, and by the end of the year, I hope to be I hope to be bigger than I was at the beginning of this year. If that's not an understatement, I don't know what it is. But thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. I think this is actually the second non Four Sides podcast I've done. So
All
I'll
right.
that one off my bucket list.
Right on. Well, I appreciate you. You know,
Yeah,
uh, being a cool dude to talk to. Through text or just in person. I really hope we can hang out a show again sometime soon. Whenever, if God willing, COVID finally gets eradicated or at least slowed down, and I
you
hope.
bring that now that you bring that up, I would like to say that I know we talked about the Anify Underground earlier and how the masks wasn't really a thing at the first show. There will be masks required at the next show, so if that makes you guys more comfortable attending, then there you have it.
Absolutely. And I had I had my mask on the whole show. My new Jack picture it is with mask. So yeah, wear your mask, folks. But
Yes,
definitely hope we can have you back as far for some future collaborations, and uh,
absolutely, man. I'd have you on mine sometime too,
I'd
but
love
we'll
that.
talk.
I'd love
Yeah, we'll
that.
talk. I got I got a lot of people coming on, so it may not be until later, but we'll get you on sometime.
Oh, it's all. I know exactly what it's like. Where it's like, how do I work this in? Because I got this guy coming in. I don't want to put him off, but you're my buddy, and I don't want to put you off. And then I got this other person who they finally got back to me, and they did artwork for Marvel Comics. Oh God, what do I do? Like
Hey
that
man,
is the life of a
podcast
podcaster.
it's like having a second job, dude. I mean, people are all like, "Oh, any old jerk off from the internet could go start a podcast." No, dude, this takes a lot of effort, and I'm glad you've stuck with it too.
I'm glad. I'm glad we have. I'm glad I can meet other passionate people with the same same interests that want to do things like this in this area. Because I know just even 5 years ago, for the area we live in, it's a conservative area. Some people are nice, some people are not. If you say you're starting a wrestling or comic book podcast, they're gonna look at you sideways and go,
Uh-huh. Yep.
"Why are you?" And then say something that I don't want to repeat. But there you go. But I want to thank you for coming on. Like I said, gotta work together in the future. We have there's a lot of stuff we could work on together. I think that could really make for good content, and we want.
Absolutely.
I hope some of your listeners can find my podcast, and some of my listeners can find yours, and definitely subscribe to Foresight's podcast. We'll uh, we'll get the links in the description box below, and if you enjoyed this, please give a like, share, subscribe for more content, not just from the world of pro wrestling, but from the world of anime, gaming, comics, and all things geek culture. Follow Caleb on his social media pages; those will also be in the description box below. And follow me on my social media pages, facebook.com/athleticgeek89, Twitter athletic_geek89, Instagram athleticgeek89. And if you would like to help contribute to the channel financially, hit me up on Patreon, patreon.com/athleticgeek89. But we'll see you guys next time. Have a good one.
Yep.